Eastside family, and congratulations. We have now gone through 3 of the 4 Gospels. We're on our final Gospel, the Gospel of John. And this happens to be one of my all-time favorite books. So I'm very excited to get to introduce it to you guys. We're going to be looking at chapter 1 today. And the very first thing that you guys are going to see is that John is very different from the rest of the Gospels. Sometimes when we're reading through Mark or Luke, it was probably easy to go, wait a second, I think I've read this exact same thing. And you have read something very similar in the Gospels before. But when you get to John, he writes completely differently. And there's a good reason for that. And you're going to see that in this very first chapter. In fact, let's look at chapter 1, verse 1 right now. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. It's pure poetry, and that's the way that John writes. He is very poetic. He is very cosmic in his writing. He doesn't just jump into Jesus' ministry. He doesn't talk about his childhood growing up like Luke. And he doesn't start with a genealogy like Matthew. But instead, he starts at the beginning of time. And he talks about how this Word, which is Jesus, by the way, is the very reason that everything is here. He is the creative Word of God. The active Word of God. It's a powerful image to describe Jesus. Not just a man, but the Son of God, God himself. And that's how he starts his book, which is pretty incredible. And the rest of chapter 1 is incredible as well. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit, because you guys are going to read this on your own, and I'm sure you're going to find it as fascinating as I did, but I want to just point out a couple things. John, being so different, is most likely because he was writing his gospel way later than the other gospels were written. Matthew, Mark, and Luke were all written pretty early on. They were written when the church was just getting started, and people needed to know all of this that has happened with Jesus. They didn't have the full story, so these Gospels were written for the church. But John wrote his Gospel later, probably when he was a very old man. In fact, John was probably one of the last disciples left by the time he wrote this. Maybe even one of the last people to really walk with Jesus on this earth. And he wrote this book to the next generation of Christians, to the children who were being raised in the church who didn't see Jesus. They didn't hear about the crucifixion. That wasn't a part of their world. So when John writes this, he writes with a completely different audience in mind. And so he focuses on some different things. John talks a lot about belief versus unbelief. He talks about the group of people who are the unbelieving in the world. In fact, that's what he calls them, the world. He's talking about those who do not believe. And all through this book, you'll begin to see this question come up of, do you believe? And there are these groups of people that believe until something is just too weird, too crazy, and then they walk away. Or the ones that, well, they'll believe if there's a really good sign. In fact, the last story in chapter 1 is talking about this with Nathanael. Nathanael is very skeptical of Jesus. He just doesn't know if Jesus can be the real thing. Until Jesus says, I saw you under the fig tree, something that Jesus had no way of knowing except that he is the Son of God. And Nathanael is blown away by this sign. Jesus responds by saying, Nathanael, because I said to you, this is in verse 50, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? you will see greater things than these. And he said to him, Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Now, this may not seem like such a powerful thing all by itself, and it probably just seemed confusing to Nathanael. But all through this book, Jesus is pointing out that you're either someone who believes or you're someone who doesn't. And for Nathanael, it didn't take much, and he was a believer. For some of the others, it took a lot more to convince them. And for the person reading this, we have that same question. Do we believe? And that's John's whole point. John is pouring out his experience with Jesus, walking and talking with the Son of God, and asking that question of us. Do we believe? So, as you're reading today, I hope you really enjoy chapter 1, and I hope you are able to really get into the poetry and just the unique writing style of John and enjoy it. And we will see you tomorrow for chapter 2.